Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown School Board to order. It is February 6th, 2023, 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. I'd also like to recognize all those in our audience tonight. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. No requests for public communication. Conflicts of interest. Does anyone declare any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? Yes, Aaron.
Just in the event that the board goes into executive session for negotiation strategies, I would like to declare a conflict with my wife being a teacher in the public school. That being said, I do feel like I'll be impartial in the discussions.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other conflicts? Gail?
I would also declare that my daughter is a teacher for the school district, but I believe I would not in any way be influenced by that and would make sound decisions. I also have no financial interest in her or her affairs anymore because she's a grown-up.
Thank you. All right. Jason?
Is now an appropriate time for a motion to deal with those conflicts? Can we make a motion to set aside the conflicts if they so choose?
If someone is interested in making that motion, however, we could also do it at the end. If we go to executive session, it would be up to you. Either way would work. So, Dan, would you be willing to read the norms? Thank you. Without being previously asked, so thank you.
Okay. I can read.
Okay.
The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, to commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, moving on in our agenda, number 2, consent agenda. At any time, if a board member would like to remove something from the consent agenda, they can do so. It does not need a second. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Dan, second by Gail. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to our regular meeting, under A, recognition. Number 1, we have the WDA Academic All Conference, and some of you may have seen this on different social media or news things. The good news is the list is so long of students that we aren't going to read all of the names, but it listed all the fall sports. It's in your drive, where all the students met the academic achievement requirements this fall, and so that was a really nice graphic that they put together, so we appreciate that. So, under correspondence, we do have some correspondence. We have a thank you card from the family, Margot Hout, the family of the Roger Hout. We have a thank you card from Heidi Eckert and Tammy Jo Mouse for some flowers for their father's passing. And also Sally Ost sent us a thank you card for the retirement plaque and the retirement party. So we appreciate all those and just wanted to make note of those. In addition, in your drive, you might have noticed Dollars for Scholars. We received a letter from the president, Deanne Ament, and appreciating the previous support, they want to note that in 2017, they only had 16 scholarships, and 5 years later, last May, they were able to award 45 scholarships. totaling $44,600 to graduating seniors looking to further their education at vocational, technical college, or university institutions. Their goal is to provide a scholarship for every graduating student. They will be taking part in Giving Hearts Day on Thursday, February 9th. And so there is some matches from, and so their goal is to raise $12,000. So just want to make note of that. And if you're looking at Giving Hearts Day, that they are one of the opportunities to give. So thank you for that. Under reports, number 1, negotiation seminar report. For those that attended the negotiation seminar, would you be able to just say a few words? I think it was Jason and Dan.
I'll start. Two-day seminar. The first day, much like our annual conference, they refer to as the early bird. So that was a good reminder session on some legal things, but also like school board committees, making sure that those are set up, noticed, all that wonderful stuff correctly. Then we went into negotiations with superintendents, other admin, and then of course the afternoon of that first day was dealing with teacher non-renewals and discharge. So that was a good review. For new member, or if you're a newer member, I would encourage that also because it's a good refresher. I think Christy was glad that she participated in both days. Then the second day was when we really got into the negotiations piece. Again, having gone through a couple of sessions on the board, a lot of it was review, but there's people there that have been there probably a dozen times or more, and they say they always pick up something new. And so we heard a lot from Amy DeCook, who is the School Board Association's general counsel. I enjoyed the session that was geared towards impasse and how to avoid and make sure we do everything we can before we need to go there. And of course, a highlight this year on that was the new timeline of July 1st, needing to have a contract or declare impasse unless both sides agree to continue. Then we had a experienced negotiator panel moderated by Dr. Leck. A lot of good scenarios there that are occurring in school districts now. And then the legislative panel kind of wrapped up the day. I'll just say, and I was actually supposed to be in Bismarck today with the superintendent's family engagement cabinet, but I didn't go because I'm doing some other legislative things, but I did talk to Superintendent Baszler, and I don't think it's any secret that there's a different vibe this year in Bismarck towards probably not just education, but a lot of things. And I'm not saying a bad vibe, or I think there's a lot of creative thinking going on, which is good in my opinion, but just a different vibe in Bismarck in the legislature. So that was what I thought.
Not really. I guess I'll just add that you mentioned the new timelines and the dates. I did cross-check, and so all the plans that we have laid out from Dr. Leck and everybody were compliant with those timelines, and the plan we have moving forward is consistent with that. So again, I've never experienced this before, so it was good to see it laid out so well and the procedures followed, and so looking forward to it.
Any questions for Dan and Jason from the board, or comments, or? I guess I would just like to comment, thank you. This is the start of it. First, takes 2 days out of work and out of your life to go and attend this, so I appreciate your dedication and your time served in that, as well as the upcoming meetings and so forth, so thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Moving on, board education, number 1, educational competency procedures for policy BBC. We'll start with that, and then we'll move on to our next one.
I know as a board you'll be surprised by this, but I have very little to say in board education. We have talked about this policy in the past. It's important that we continue to bring it back to you. It's the method. Policy BBC is the method for filling a board vacancy. We're aware that we have a board vacancy. Very quickly, I'll share that your board policy outlines you have 3 options. You can simply select or appoint. You can go through a selection process. You can go through the election. In the past, we have almost exclusively, at least the time that I have been here, used a selection process. I am assuming that's what that is what you want to do, but it is not my decision to make. It's the board's in terms of how you want to proceed. I'd be happy to answer questions related to these options, but you could ruminate on this for another meeting or so, or you could give me direction in terms of how you want to proceed. But again, your options are an election, a simple appointment, or a selection procedure. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions, comments? Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would be in support of going through the selection process and starting with that, so.
I'm in agreement with that. Do we want to start looking at a timeline at this meeting, or do we want to look at that at the next meeting?
Well, I think we got that 60 days
Yep.
of what we have to
Yep, we
engage
do.
in, so, yeah, I would just, if we can just give the direction in this meeting, I think that'd be best, and then move forward with that. And then, from our last process, we talked about also giving the viable candidates an opportunity to come in front of the board to
we can do that.
2 or 3 minutes to speak on their behalf.
I don't think we need necessarily a motion for this, just a general kind of agreement that's, I mean, we're governed by the policy of 60 days, so we have to do something in that timeline. Is that an acceptable process? Everyone in favor of that? Okay. Dr. Leck, you want to move, and you and Christy want to move forward with that process of the selection?
Yep, and we will have more information then for you on February 20th at our next meeting, and we'll outline the process, and we can look through the selection procedures and look how and when we could create a timeline, look how and when we can integrate board interviews or allowing them to speak before the candidates to speak before the board. In the past, the board has done that at times, and at times have not. So we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I've been part of both, and so it's, what I'm been through the process with either one, so either is good. Okay, and nothing else, Dr. Leck? Any other questions from the board or comments? Board Education number 2. Oh, sorry, Dan.
The 60 days start basically January 9th.
Yeah, good question, Dan. Number 2, education and competency, work-based learning. We have a few folks here, Mr. Gaylor, Mr. Heiner, and Mr. Wagen.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us. I'm Darby Heinert. I'm Assistant Director of James Valley Career and Tech, and Jerry Wagen is with me too. He's our Work-Based Learning Coordinator. Jerry comes to us from most recently Montpelier. He's had over 37 years in education now. He first started in Edgeley and then moved on to Montana, where he served for 25 years in education, both as a teacher and an administrator, and then came back to North Dakota and finished his last 10 years with Montpelier in the area of administration too. It's been great having him on board. His retirement was brief, and I'd like to keep it that way, simply because Jerry is absolutely dynamic in building relationships, which is maybe the most important piece of work-based learning, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. Co-op is just that. It is all about work-based learning, and there's a couple different ways work-based learning can be earned and achieved. So part of that can be in the classroom. All right, and we have a couple larger projects going on in our center right now. And when it's in the classroom, it's a sustained, simulated experience that would be very similar to industry. For example, in building trades right now, we're building a 400 square foot lake cabin, and that will take us right up to the end of May. okay, with that particular project. So in terms of meeting the 45 hours of work-based learning for that experience, that will be no problem at all. We also have a full restoration taking place in auto collision right now. It's a 2007 Dodge pickup, and they have replaced quite a bit of equipment on that vehicle and done a lot of repair work. Most of it is set and ready for the paint booth. So that has been a neat project for our kids as well. We have a number of projects in auto tech, too many to mention, that would fit the guidelines of work-based learning. And so that's a unique way of getting there. Not every kid has an opportunity to participate in a co-op. It's open to every kid, but because of schedule constraints and things of that nature, other activities that they're involved in, sometimes there are some obstacles along the way. I will tell you this, I'm very grateful it's there. Co-ops do a great deal for kids. First of all, it creates a network for them. So they get to meet people of industry and work side by side with them, with professionals that have been in the business for a long time. They get to work with equipment and see new state-of-the-art equipment that we don't have as of yet. And so it's great that they get to have an experience like that. They have the exposure of working with the public. They gain some real enriched experiences in terms of what it's like to be an employee. One thing that we talk about in career and tech all the time is career-ready practices. So we're constantly talking about professionalism. We talk about collaboration, communication, technical skills, and co-ops are rich with that, okay? And so I appreciate having that there. Truth be told, we would have a difficult time right now seating everybody in CTE if we didn't have co-ops, all right? And Jerry's going to share some numbers with you in terms of how we've grown in that capacity. This year, for example, in auto tech alone, we had to create 3 blocks for auto tech. Much of that is due to the demand for diesel technology. Some of our kids they're just truly passionate about automobiles. A couple of them are going to go into small engine. Some are going to work maybe someday like in a automotive garage like at Wilhelm's or Stouts or something of that nature. But by and large, diesel technology is definitely driving that. And the co-op gives kids an opportunity to build some great relationships that hopefully eventually would lead to a sponsorship. I want to be respectful and mindful of your time. And Jerry has a presentation to share with you, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what co-ops and work-based learning can look like. So I'm going to hand it over to him. And if you have any questions of me at the end, I'll be happy to answer those for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Heinert. Kind of makes me feel old, though, 37. This is year 38. Definitely a new capacity for me as the work-based learning coordinator at JVCTC, and I'm thrilled to be there. It's just an amazing experience, and the opportunity that we're providing our students it's unmatched. And so we'll kind of go through, I'll make a brief summary of what we have, and you can see that up on the overhead there. I'll give you a quick second to turn around. But basically, work-based learning is just a chance for students, and a simple way to put it is to take what they've learned in the classroom and put it into the real-world experience and hands-ons. You know, it's easy for students to learn in the classroom, but it's not always easy to apply. And so that's one of the great benefits of the work-based learning. And it not only benefits students, but it benefits the employers as well as the educators. And our goal, and the key word, and Mr. Heiner mentioned the word earlier, was talking about relationships. We're creating relationships with students and businesses and our school because we all are partners together, and so this is a key part of what we're doing here with work-based learning. I have North Dakota Choice Rating. I'm sure you guys have talked about that plenty, but this is part of being workforce ready. This is a key component of it, having at least those 40 hours, and Mr. Heinert mentioned that a little bit earlier as well, so I'm not going to go into that. So I'm just going to throw these up there. Whoops, maybe one too fast. And we'll try one more time. Thank you. I'm used to having a clicker. But anyway, if you take a look at all those different benefits our students are getting from having a co-op experience, it's amazing. And because once again, we talked about learning in and out, but we're also developing those work habits. It seems like one of those things that's slipping away from our students a little bit, and we can start them a little bit earlier and get them some guided practice to do that. Communication skills, that's huge. And we talked with our students about if you're going to be gone, make sure your boss knows. So often we're hearing about, employees not showing up. They don't let anybody know. And the employers are counting on them. And so those communications are huge as well. And we talk about self-confidence, self-esteem. I think some of our students are finding out they can do things they never even imagined that they could do. And what an awesome experience for them. A little bit about our employers as well. It's creating a way of getting some potential employees. We all know that we're all struggling to fill all those positions. And that gives them a chance to start filling those positions, bringing those students in from high school. And next thing you know, they might be working for them. And they won't have to worry about that. Where's that next employee going to come from? Hopefully they're going to be highly motivated. And I don't like reading through everything. You guys can read as well as I can. But being able to participate in that work-based learning experience and helping the students and pick the students a little bit and say, oh, we're kind of looking for this, and we're looking for key components, and we can maybe fill those needs, whether it's welding or some other field. And it doesn't hurt to have a good positive image either, because we all know we'd like to give back to the community, and this is a positive way to do so. And if you have any questions at all, please jump in, let me know. As far as our school goes, you can see up there, we talk about clarifying goals, number 3 up there, that third bullet. I think that's one of the things that I've seen over my many years, thanks Darby, my many years, is that students have kind of lost their focus on how to get a goal. And I'm not sure if the pandemic kind of threw kids off track or what, but a lot of times you see a lot of shoulder shrugging. And what do you want to do? And so hopefully by getting them into the business, getting their hands dirty, they can go, yeah, I think I can do that. Now I have a goal, I have a focus, instead of just trudging through school. And so that's a great positive thing that we have there. We also see some more great relationships being built there, keeping up to date on working with the businesses, what's going on in your business, what do we need to do, what do we need to be teaching. So those are really good benefits that we have. The next couple slides have some of the businesses that we're working with. I don't have them all, but I just wanted to give you a feel for all the businesses that are participating with us now. And you can see there's a wide range of businesses that are taking part in this, whether it be construction, and working with professional support staff. We have a student working in machining. We need machinists, and they're just thrilled to death to have somebody out there who can do those things. And the second one, we have working out at Butler, working at Southwood, Heartland Heating and Cooling. Everybody knows we need plumbers, and we need electricians, and we need the heating and cooling people. You name it, we need it. We have a student working, doing a co-op out at JRM&C that looking at being a physical therapist. I mean, those are just some of the things, and that's not them all. I should mention interstate engineering, which is a great one. We have a student out there, he's doing computer programming and working in creating a base and test labs. I mean, wow, this is an outstanding student, but what a good experience. He gets to do that, and he's helping interstate engineering. So, like I said, that's just some of them. We really appreciate every business that has come through for us. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite parts of the job is going out and visiting with the different businesses, and they're so happy to have you there and willing to work with me. And the students, they go, yeah, and not everything is going to be perfect. We know that because in the end, they're still 17, 18-year-old students. But they're really happy to have that opportunity to kind of foster that growth of those students. I just throw that up. I'm not going to talk about it, but Golden Path, Solutions is just another organization that is in Fargo that provides an opportunity for different ways for businesses and students and schools to connect. And I'll just throw that up there. You can look them up on the internet, but the QR code for that as well. And that's just the contact information. The QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner is just a summary of the presentation. But I just want to kind of share a few little facts with you really quick. So when I began this job back in August, it was like, well, Jerry, I think we're going to have about 15 students. Well, he's laughing because we know what happened is that it jumped up to 25. 25, okay. Yeah, and that's great. Working students, I'm getting to know all these students and names and faces. And when they come in, some of them are so enthusiastic, it just makes a joy to be there. And it really is. Everyone wonders how I did it for so many years. It's the students that keep me young. And these guys do that. So we had 25 this first semester. And, well, we thought it would grow. So the second semester, we're at about 39 students now, so we're jumped about 57%. And I'm working 2 days a week for 10 hours total. So, it could be a little challenging in between semesters and once it got going as well. But I'm going to go out and try to visit some of the business. I can't always go and watch students because that's what I'd like to do, but there's some of those professions you can't go. I mean, I can't follow a CNA or something like that. That just is not very professional. But those are some of the things that, think about. We did talk about all the different professions or the things that our students are doing. And I have taken the opportunity, I've kind of reached out to some of the community groups. I have talked to the Rotary Club as well as the Kiwanis. I've also presented to the Chamber of Commerce, the Workforce Committee. So we've been, and Mr. Heiner's been great help, and as well as all the staff members and the counselors at the school. We've been learning to work together. There's some things that we still got to figure out, but definitely has gotten better at this second semester. And I guess I know there's going to be a bright future for this, and I can just see it expanding even more, because why not get the students where they get their hands into the work. So anyway, I'll answer any questions you might have as well.
Any questions for either of them? Jason?
Perfect segue to answer or hopefully deal with issues, a lot of local issues, even workforce and whatnot. Where are we at in the process of linking some of these students to secondary education? Are we at all working with, because we're doing a great job now of getting young people lined up with potential employers. I'm just wondering if, reaching out and doing a little more on the college enrollment guidance, I'm sure that's already happening, but anything to speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I have when I have the visits with every individual student, I always ask them what's their goals and aspirations, and we talk about the colleges and different choices that they have. And you have to put it out there, and I know the counselors at the school do a great job, but also the instructors will reach out to them as well. So no, that's a great question.
Have any of the cooperating partners discussed or brought up potentially tuition reimbursement for some of these students?
Yeah. Butler is currently doing, we have a student out there, and they got a process going. Mr. Heiner, you might know some more.
John Deere has worked with us in the auto tech area as well. Titan has a program too. It has slowed down a little bit, but this is no exaggeration. Every 2 weeks I was receiving a phone call from industry last year. As far west as Williston, Dickinson, they wanted to meet with our kids to talk about oil field opportunities, things of that nature. But more or less, you're speaking of the college realm. We do really encourage businesses to link, to consider sponsorships, and so we also provide a tour to NDSCS. We have toured Lake Region State College. I'd be happy to take kids to BSC if there's interest there, in terms of the trades. Yes, in certain program areas, there just seems to be a natural fit. There's a segue, if you will. We're building a format right now. It's a work in progress. Again, I want to be respectful of your time, but it's a CDA credential that we'll be building in childcare, so our students will eventually leave with a certificate that allows them to transition either straight to the workforce, or it's a nice segue too to go on to a school like Lake Region where they can further gain licensure for childcare too. So yes, in short, yep. Yep.
Any other questions from the board? No questions? Okay, thank you. We'd like to really just again reiterate, thank you to the businesses in our community that have supported this. You know, it's always a little bit extra to have another person there and to make it a positive experience for our students, but we appreciate everyone helping with that. If a business is hearing this and thinking, you know, I think it'd be a good opportunity for a student to do a co-op in our business, what do they do? How do they reach you? Oh, it just, if someone listening to this has a business and thinking it might be beneficial to have a co-op, you know, if they want to host a co-op in their business, who do they contact?
Sure. Well, they can contact James Valley Career and Tech at 252-8841. Talk to myself. They're welcome to talk to anyone in that program area that would, you know, be in that field. So there's so many ways to do it. They can, of course, talk to Jerry too. He would set it up once speaking to a teacher. You know, they want to build that relationship to find out, hey, just where exactly is that skill level of that student? You know, and so that's why, you know, it's complex to say, well, it's just one person. There's a lot of legwork that's involved in it behind the scenes. Because if Jerry gets the contact, he comes to me about it, and then we have a visit with the teacher and say, hey, give us an idea, where is this kid's skill set at? You know, and so we're a big believer in that. We don't want to mislead industry, you know, and we have some kids that are highly skilled, and that's really exciting to see. They will transition well, whether it's to further their education off to a school of the trades or whether they move straight into industry. So, yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Leck, your superintendent's report.
Thank you. You have my written report. I think the board is aware, one of my favorite things to do at board meetings is board reports. I like to talk about and provide awareness to the board on all of the things that we're doing, the things of importance. Those are the things that typically I bring to you. I'm not looking forward to my board report because I need to share information with you that, like you, probably, well, what it did for me is likely the same emotions that you had. It made me angry, it made me sad, it made me disappointed, and it was not something that I'm looking forward to talking about, but it's something that we, as being an accountable institution, need to talk about. We need to talk about and own and talk about what we're going to be doing moving forward, what happened, what we're doing moving forward. This is an important conversation that, even though I'm not looking forward to having with you, it's an important conversation that we have. So, of course, I'm talking about January 31st, basketball game between Jamestown High School and Bismarck High School. I did issue a press release. I know that the board is aware and you have seen the press release, but I want to talk a little bit about that incident, at least in the terms of what occurred. As I noted in the press release, the district did find, upon our investigation, did find that students engaged in behaviors that surprised us, elicited those feelings of disappointment and anger and sadness, because they violated our anti-harassment and discrimination policy. As the board is aware, that's policy AAC. Harassing language, discriminatory language, they have no place in Jamestown Public Schools. That is contrary to the values that underpin our district. They are contrary to the values that underpin our community. And these are actions that we need to talk about and deal with appropriately. And so I want to talk a little bit about procedurally how something like this works. But generally speaking, I just want to reaffirm that as a district, we need to accept accountability for what occurred, ensure our policies are followed, and then look to address moving forward how we're going to react. So, as you might imagine, from initially, these types of things begin with an allegation. We have to interview. We have to go through an investigatory process. That's how it works. We have to determine what happened, what occurred, and that was a process that I can share included dozens and dozens and dozens of interviews with students, with employees, with others that were in attendance at the game. Since January 31st, and really that began on the evening of January 31st, the initial communication out, I was made aware around 10 o'clock, 10:15. I unfortunately wasn't at this game, but I did hear and I was made aware. We initiated a conversation immediately with Mr. Gaylor, who was a supervisor there, Mr. Rolton, who was a supervisor there, to ask what had occurred. That shifted to a conversation with Jordan Wilhelm, who was the coach of Bismarck High School. I wanted to call to hear, what he had. Again, at this time, this is very new. We had very limited information. I had a conversation with Coach Wilhelm to see how what occurred from his perspective and to check how the boys were doing. That was followed by a call to the district superintendent, Dr. Hornbacher, at Bismarck Public Schools, because we wanted to make sure that he was aware. I shared the same message with Coach Wilhelm that I did with Dr. Hornbacher, that this was a very serious thing, and we would very swiftly begin to investigate, which is what we did, starting on the next day. So again, we engaged dozens. I couldn't even put a finger on it. I'd have to count. And I'd need Mr. Gaylor and Mr. Conway, Mr. Roltz, and others all engaged in interviews as part of this investigation. And ultimately, what we found was those allegations to be accurate. Those discriminatory remarks were made, and as you could imagine, that elicits consequence. And those consequences are followed in policy, and those are what were enacted, but consequences are only a piece. And I think that's really important. It's an important piece. We have to be accountable as individuals, but beyond individual consequences, there's a much bigger picture here, and that's how we're going to react. And I want to touch on that, but I want to talk about one other thing before I do that. And the other is we have really two prongs of the investigation that we have to consider. The first is what occurred. And once we found out what occurred, we could drill down into, well, if that happened, and just like in any consequence, this student did this, here's the consequence. The second prong of the investigation are other questions that I'm sure many in the community have heard, the board has heard, and that is, how did we handle the issue during the game, after the game? And I shared a little bit about after the game, and we're investigating now what occurred during the game. So that's where the status of investigations are now. We're looking at what occurred during. So that's where I'm at. I can tell you a few things that the district has done, either myself, Mr. Rolton, Mr. Gaylor, have done in that time that looks beyond just the incident, but what are we going to do about it? So we have reached out a number of different times, actually, well, twice, to BHS through the coaching staff. We wanted to determine if restorative practices were desired by the basketball team. They are processing that desire if they want to engage in those or not, but we felt it was important to offer so they can help to process the situation and for us to be a part of facilitating healing for Bismarck High School basketball players. I appreciate Mr. Gaylor engaging with student leaders. That's mostly been the student council, at least as far as I know, although there could be others involved as well. But just looking at, what can we do? What do we need to do? What types of activities are our students interested in and would respond positively to? That's something that we're also interested in doing to facilitate greater awareness. We've had, I don't know how many conversations with different members of Bismarck High School administration. In one of the areas that I've been really appreciative of, Bismarck High School, Dr. Hornbacher made available to us, and I had a nice conversation with her, but Sashay Shetler is the Indian Education Coordinator at Bismarck High School. We had a very nice conversation regarding resources that they have that they'd be willing to share with Jamestown Public, which I think is a wonderful offer, and we'll certainly take them up on that. But lastly, I've also had a good opportunity. I know if you remember the name Dr. Usselman. Tamara Usselman is former superintendent in Bismarck. Now she serves as the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Fargo Public Schools. I have a long-standing friendship with Dr. Usselman, and she has really been invaluable as a wealth of knowledge to help us understand what procedurally how we can help to move forward, and I think she's been really a great resource. But with that, I'm going to stand for questions before I move on in different parts of the report.
Dan, you had your hand up first.
Thank you for the report and keeping us up to date on this. It's the board right now is necessarily not involved in a lot of the details on this, so it's squarely on your shoulders to handle a lot of this. At some point, though, after this initial round of investigations and the corrective actions are done, I do think I would like to have the board meeting some kind of an executive session to give us an opportunity to ask questions in more detail, to look longer term, make sure that we have the right level of oversight. Because it did go so far outside of our community, I think it'd just be prudent for us to have some kind of insight strategically when this initial portion of it is done.
And I would just share, we do have policy that governs a lot of this as you shared it. Policy directs how a lot of this proceeds, and the information that we can share isn't always what you as a board may want to know. It would exclude certain things that I couldn't share with the board. We couldn't share with the community. FERPA, as a good example, that we couldn't share student names, of course, and disciplinary actions that are tied to students, things like that, though we simply can't share. But to the degree that I can, I'm certainly willing to communicate where we are, what we've learned from the situation, and how we are going to react moving forward.
Gail, go ahead.
I too want to thank you for what was hard for all of us to deal with. But I really want to emphasize that we need to look and have a deeper understanding of why things like this happen. They don't just happen in Jamestown. I'm very sad that it happened here, and it happened at a school and in a community I love, but there are bigger issues here. I think to avoid them would be, we'd be very remiss. As I was processing what happened, I started to do some research too, and I found out that most children of a different race, when they come to school, it's the first time they actually hear a slur. That average age is 6. That broke my heart. Why is that happening? We can't have that. I think it gives us an opportunity to explore with kids crowd mentality and what happens when we're with a crowd and we may do things that aren't like us. It brought back a real painful incident from my past that I've shared with students when I was having pizza at Pizza Corner after a dance, and there was a young man who had cerebral palsy, and there were people in my group who made fun of him. And I remember being corrected by somebody else, and it was a great learning experience for me. Uncomfortable, and my silence was complicity. And I've had to learn to live with that and understand that. But we need to help our kids understand those things. I also feel that diversity, inclusion, and equity are at the heart of this. And I want to make sure that as we pass that CRT language later, that is not what we are doing. CRT, the way it's written there, we should still be talking about things that make us uncomfortable, because this is uncomfortable. I'm sure it's uncomfortable for everybody here, but it's necessary that we will not shy away from those things and that we will learn history accurately and what happened. My brother-in-law's mother was in an Indian school, and I've learned more about that than I ever did when I was in school. I was never taught that. And that is important that they learn history accurately. And that is not what we're doing if we pass that. Because what is underneath all of this is what really matters, because what happened here could happen anywhere, and what happened here shouldn't happen anywhere. That's just my thing. Also, to consider that your school counselors, there's particular ASCA curriculum that deals with racial injustice in schools and racial equity and inclusion. They could be a tremendous resource for you moving forward too, because we cannot ignore this. It's way too important. I'll get off.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, Gail. Dr. Leck?
If I can just interject real quickly, something I wanted to talk about when we were talking about FERPA and investigations. Investigations, for example, take time. And sometimes when we take time, and it takes a great deal of time, sometimes that can be viewed then as inaction. We aren't doing anything because it takes so much time to get us to a place where we can accurately say, okay, we've talked to 47 people. Here's what we found, and to make a determination that's not rushed. This is an important conversation, but we have to be factually accurate on what we find. And there's times when we talk about when we leave out things like students' names or what level of discipline was included, things that we can't talk about, and that sometimes makes it seem like we're minimizing. Well, we are not. I can tell you, we have not taken this. We have taken this strongly since the very, very first time that phone call came and I found out this is what occurred. And I know from many other people that were involved, when they heard, it was the same experience you had, that kind of gut shot, visceral kind of feeling. That's what everybody had. And we do not condone what occurred, but that doesn't mean we can very quickly rush to judgment. We have to take time and investigate, so we are doing this accurately, correctly, and making sure that when we do issue consequences and we do take action, that we are doing the right thing. But sometimes I get it. When something like this happens, a lot of anger occurs. I respect that and I understand it. But that doesn't mean that we aren't taking action. I couldn't think of a stronger reaction than what we have been dealing with over the last week, almost week. But again, I understand how, from the outside looking in, that may appear that not very much is happening, but I can only assure you that it is. But it just takes time to do.
Gail, I'm going to go to Aaron, then I'll come back to you.
And this is quickly, I also want to point out that those students involved too, I hope that they have an opportunity for growth. Because change is possible, and change of understanding what happened, and an opportunity to be accepted and to grow is also something that should be a part of this. I don't think a mistake that a kid makes because they were acting in a way that they got away from them or they didn't understand should penalize them forever. I hope this is also an opportunity for growth and treat it like that, and which is the great thing about, those restorative practices really give that opportunity for growth. So I'm glad that that's something that's being used. So I didn't want to make it sound like that way either.
Thank you, Gail. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we just need to recognize as a board, too, that we have responsibility in this, and we need to hold ourselves accountable. Obviously not from the administrative standpoint, but from a policy standpoint, which then drives culture into our environment. So I think we owe it to ourselves to reflect on this and see what we can do better as a board from a policy standpoint, and addressing some of the preventative stuff, not just the consequence stuff, because the consequence stuff is after the fact. How can we get in front of it? So I would like to, with Dan's suggestion there, or some sort of that we as a board take some action ourselves on this to do things better.
Thank you, Aaron. Melissa, did you have your hand up? Okay. Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay. Jason?
I guess I don't need to repeat a lot of the same sentiments around the room. What really struck me yesterday was I did get the feeling, as I'm sure other folks do, that, and I respect what Dr. Leck said about the timing, or the time it takes to deal with this correctly, legally, all that good stuff. But it just really struck me yesterday that I hope the perception out there is that we don't care, because, and I don't think that is, but it could easily be assumed that nothing is happening because we're just going to try to make it go away, and that's not the case. I just want people to understand and reiterate that this does take time, and anger and time don't always go well together. One of the questions, though, Dr. Leck, on what you mentioned, could you provide some context? Looking at doing some activities students might be interested in doing, could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. I think a part of moving forward is engaging with students, that it's not just a heavy-handed, Dr. Leck or Mr. Gaylor, somebody says, well, these are the initiatives we're going to use. This is what we're going to do to improve our cultural competence. The idea behind engaging with student leaders is to make sure that those ideas are developed in conjunction with students and not just done to students. We want them to be engaged in that process to determine what kinds of activities, like we might think an activity is great, and the students say, you know what, that's not going to move the bar. Maybe we need to do this. Just engaging with kids, our students, to make sure that we are doing activities that will connect with them.
Jason?
And can we also ensure that we're including adults in, what we're going to be doing here too, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think so. I think that depends on, I think we would certainly have adults engaged in those conversations as well, facilitating with students. But if there are other areas, other individuals that could help, I mentioned like Sachet and Dr. Usselman, both great resources. But if there are others that want to help out, I can't imagine Mr. Gaylor would say, no, please don't help.
Diane?
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that with crisis comes opportunity. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to dive deep into this. As Gail mentioned, I think that as we got into the critical race theory discussion, the woke laws, I had more people stop me on the street than I have had in several years. And the general feeling was that we don't need this, that racism doesn't exist anymore, that we need to teach the ABCs and nothing else. And this is an opportunity to show our community that that is not true, that we need to embrace what has happened here in a positive way, in that it's an opportunity to educate and to, one of the premises of CRT is that racism is embedded and it's systemic. And we need to look at that and talk about it, even no matter what happens at the state level. We need, as a community, to look into this in an open-minded way and with the idea that we can grow from it, and that these students don't need to be just punished, but need to be educated. And I'm looking forward to the outcome. Thank you.
Maybe one last, statement on this before I move on to my report. It's, Gail, you mentioned it earlier. It's, I think the board has an opportunity, and I felt like I had an opportunity in my report to model. These are uncomfortable conversations. It's uncomfortable to look at a failing It's uncomfortable to say we didn't do this very well, or we failed a group of people, or we did something that we should not be proud of. That's hard to have an open conversation about that. It's hard to have a dialogue when you don't do something well. It's easy to talk about the stuff you do well. It's really hard to have a conversation about something that made people angry, have resulted in a very visceral feelings from people, not just in Jamestown, but in Bismarck and Williston and really across the country. We've had feedback. So I think it's important that we, as a board, model that this dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable, needs to happen. So one last opportunity for questions before I move on. Okay. Moving into down my written report, I outlined the Jamestown Parks and Rec Literacy Walk Agreement that you'll be dealing with later on. Just for the sake of clarification, with this agreement, this ties to the Comprehensive State Literacy Development Grant. As I've talked about with the board, there's criteria or categories in which those dollars need to be spent in. They can't be transferred from one area to another. We have really been challenged in the birth to age 5 for obvious reasons. We are a K-12 institution. The birth to 5, we don't have the same level of institutional needs that make it very easy to spend dollars in the K through 12 area, but we have to spend those in birth to 5. We typically have done that through primary partners. Our most consistent primary partner has been Two Rivers Activity Center through Parks and Rec. And just to verify, this literacy walk would be in Denault Park, and there would be a series of stations with a book. Parents and children would walk to each station, and each station would be a different page of the book. There'd be discussion questions, just a way to encourage activity, but also encourage literacy. And just as a reminder, because this is into the elementary area, and we use it differently, it has to be either spent in birth to 5, or it needs to be sent back to the state. And in conversations with Parks and Rec, who again have been wonderful partners with us throughout our 2 literacy grants, and definitely recommend moving forward with this. I think it'd be something that could give back to our community and support literacy and kind of fit in the mission of both Parks and Rec and Jamestown Public Schools. So I'm making that recommendation later on in the agenda. You have a timeline for the superintendent summative evaluation. That is for your consideration. You can make changes to that as you need to. It's just a place for you to start. We do have some new course offerings. That request has come in from Jamestown High School, and as I wrote in my report, I think it's important that we recognize that when they're offered, that doesn't mean that they're going to be included on the schedule. They're offered. And if enough students take them and staffing supports them, then we can put them on the schedule. We are looking at what our current staffing, what exists from a staffing standpoint right now. So just when you're adding courses, you're adding courses for request. That doesn't mean they're going to be placed on the schedule. There's a fiber contract that you'll deal with later through Dakota Central, and just for the sake of clarification, this is just formalizing an existing agreement. Christy's been great working with Dakota Central on a few sticky areas, and we feel good now about the language that's in that contract. And I'm not going to talk a lot about legislative updates, but I am tracking a Google Doc, or I've included a Google Doc of all the bills that I'm tracking. No, I take that back. Some of the bills that I'm tracking right now, there's like 190. I think I have maybe 40, that might even be high in here. I've been a little bit busy, but what I intend to do is to include general updates on those bills that I'm tracking for you, that include the actions that are taking, where it's at, and as I go down, it'll be a description, and then what I want to do is add a little bit more information for context. You want to follow this bill because of this, or the concern with this bill is this. The benefit of this bill may be this, or this is how this bill might be used. And so I want to add a little context as we go, but that'll be a live document rather than in the past I've just listed all the bills. I figured doing a live Google Doc might be easier for you to follow. If there's any bills that you want me to take particular time on to share, just let me know. I'd be happy to do that, either in this meeting or in subsequent meetings. I'd be happy to share more information about any of the legislation, but there is a lot this year. So with that, I would stand for other questions.
Questions from the board? Jason?
Not a question, but just a comment to follow up with legislative report. I'm currently serving on the Government Affairs Committee for the School Board Association of North Dakota, so I could be the messenger for the board should we have a specific way we want to look at a bill per Dr. Leck's analysis.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for your time on that as well. Any other questions for Dr. Leck? Okay, moving on. Nothing under old business. Under new business, nothing under activities or buildings or grounds. Under curriculum assessment instruction, A, approval of new courses at the high school for the 2023 to 2024 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Is there a second? Second by Melissa. We have a motion and a second for approval of new courses at the high school for the 2023 to 2024 school year. Any discussion? Dan?
Question on the leadership offering. Would that, and it's just more of a question for Mr. Gaylor when going through the details, just how does that integrate in with things like student council and those other leadership activities? I recall when Will was reporting it, there was some kind of concern about getting people to support those kind of functions. So just kind of, can we take that into account when we offer that class?
Sure, they are not directly connected, but I would hope that they would feed, have a natural feed into that course as well, but not directly correlated, at least not to my knowledge, and that's maybe Mr. Gaylor question, but.
Aaron, did you have a question?
I had brought up in some previous meetings a concern regarding just the total number of courses that we have within our curriculum. And so this is, just on its face here, these courses, yeah, they seem like good courses. However, holistically, the overall curriculum continues to grow, and our offering to support it, and we're doing it with the same level of staffing as indicated in the proposal. So just, a couple concerns with that. Again, I think we need to look at a more holistic view of our course offering, and I think we're really getting down to sort of watered down, and then it has the appearance of piling on existing staff. It's a change, it's something new. If something gets dropped, or someone's got to pick this up, and how we just expecting do more with less kind of a scenario here, or so I have some concerns in those regards, and so I'd like to, I guess I'm not in real favor of adding more courses until we can get a comprehensive view of what this means for the staff and district as a whole.
Dr. Leck?
And just to reiterate, and I understand the question, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Because we have the classes doesn't mean they make it into the schedule. There would have to be student interest to take the classes, and if there isn't, then they aren't offered, or they aren't placed on the schedule. Having them means having them in the course book means we have a broad selection, but if there are, say 3 students that are interested in a particular class, we wouldn't offer it. It would have to work within the schedule and the current number of staffing. So I'm not sure that would take away necessarily or pile more on. It's just what would be offered based on what interest is. Does that make sense? I still understand your point,
Yeah,
but I just want to make sure that you understand from a scheduling standpoint, it wouldn't be, we aren't piling more work onto somebody. It would be, these courses are designed usually by the department. They have a desire to teach them, but again, students have to be interested to sign up and take those courses. It wouldn't be just more classes that we're piling onto a teacher. It would only be if the schedule allows for it.
So as far as the schedule is concerned, is that something that's coordinated with the school counselors to, kind of maybe drive kids towards one class? If the departments help create these and they find value in these, are the counselors involved in helping steer the kids in the right direction?
Yeah, students register, and then a schedule is made based on that. And there's a degree of confidence that goes through Empower Schedule, and it's been a really long time since I had to do this, so bear with me. But the schedule is created with a level of confidence that we can get students all of the classes that they want. So I hope I'm not getting that too wrong, Mr. Gaylor.
Mr. Gaylor, feel free to come forward.
He's going to correct all the things I got wrong. Yeah.
The student course requests go into PowerSchool as a system, and then we're able to do a build with the schedule, which matches and helps us estimate where we could move classes in order to get more requests filled. So it's always a combination of what requests are out there and then how that plays out across a student's day. Classes have like weighting factors within the backside, and I'd be glad to talk with you more about that. But there are certain classes, like we know that students will want to get into their music classes, they need to get into their core required classes, so they receive a higher weight in that the algorithm that goes into that. And then we do what's called a load process, which is loading all the requests with how the schedule has built, and then we get a match on that. And over time, we've increased that matching ability, starting from about in the high 60% area when Gail was here into the 80 and up to 90% match. We do have some natural things that, so adding like dual credit last year, you guys added dual credit comp 110 and 120, and those are things we had offered online before, but now are able to offer in person. And next year, the department chairs had made decisions about do we offer writing 4? Do we offer creative writing? Do we offer novel? Because the student enrollments were not sufficient for those classes. So a natural, organic way is that the new additions a lot of times are replacing things, taking things off of the plate for staff, because we do operate on a static staff amount, and so we can only staff certain things. So my assumption has always been wrong, and you can correct me if always been that we have the ability to offer these courses, and then we also have the ability to not offer courses based on enrollments. And so though our course catalog is extensive, there are plenty of courses that we don't offer each year based on a lack of requests for it.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. I appreciate that.
So
Aaron, go ahead.
Excuse me. So with that, then, what is the load on the staff to be able to bounce around from this class one year to that class the next year, different students? I mean, that's kind of part of my concern is
Right.
being able to prep for those classes and,
Sure.
and then having the time to do that on.
You know, some of that depends on what you teach. For some staff, you might teach, Algebra 1 for 4 preps and, one section of Algebra 2. That might be your 2 preps that you have. But we operate at 5 of 7 when you do the extended contracts. When the board approves extended contracts, that means they're taking one of those preps to 6 of 7. If you wanted to add.
So each year in the scheduling process, we work with each department chair to try to make sure that we balance that load to the degree that we can. So we look at all those requests and where things fell and determine how many sections we need to offer based on those requests as well. So then that's a conversation with each department chair about the sort of the who is teaching what, how many preps, do we have balance in that to the degree that we can, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Just one final thing then. I think this is just probably a topic then that we should address as a part of our strategic plan and what we offer for curriculum and coursework, and so it helps, so we can have some guidance on, these are the areas that we want to focus on for our district and what we want to try to present to the students. So.
And maybe one last thing to reiterate is, generally speaking, the course requests come from the departments. So these are things that they want to offer. And so there's a request, and I would think if there's a request to offer, then a teacher would be more willing to take on that prep if they're making that request to do it.
Dan?
As part of that process, is there a process for dropping a class out of the catalog? Just
Yes, so each year, they send out that course catalog, and each department chair reviews their area of that. And there are some general elective areas that administratively with the counseling team, we review those.
Sounds like there's a process in place for that.
And so then well, I think we need to look at redundancy also. And I don't know if there's anything built in on, like, if we have a plethora of courses, are we being redundant in any of the objectives learned? I don't know if that's built in, but I just noticed, like, the Intro to Ag class, that's a huge leadership component to that. And then we're offering a leadership course. That might be a poor example, but I'm just not sure if there's anything for redundancy built in.
There isn't, but I think that's a good question. I guess the redundancy perhaps would that discussion would happen inside the department, but if there's something between departments, perhaps that would just be covered administratively, I would assume, Mr. Gaylor, correct?
Yeah.
It's a good
Yep.
question.
Yeah, it's a good question, I think, related to a couple of the points there, too. I think there could be some efficiencies in terms of curriculum, and I don't know if you look at what happens across the state with standards-based learning and other environments, and looking at not just the courses as they are specifically, but looking at curriculum and standards together, and the opportunity to maybe combine things in the future. It's just, we're not quite at that point yet, but having that pre-conversation could be something to look at as a curriculum, what's offered and when and how often, so that we can take that step when we're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gaylor, again, for giving us the additional information. I appreciate that. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of new courses at the high school for the 2023 to 2024 school year. Any further discussion? If no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 4, finance. Is there a motion for approval of the budget revisions? Motion by Aaron? Second by Diane. Any discussion? And welcome, Christy. We have a motion and a second for approval of budget revisions. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of the Dakota Central Fiber Optics Service Agreement. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan, second by Steve. And now this is just kind of puts in writing what we've done before, right? It
Correct.
just- and-
Formalization. It
Thank
does
you,
include
Christine, for
some
your work.
language related to, that we didn't have in place before if we were to add or terminate lines.
Okay.
And that's what Mrs. Grounds was working on with Dakota Central.
Okay, good. So we have a motion and a second for approval of Dakota Central Fiber Optics Service. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval of the Jamestown Park and Rec Agreement. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron, second by Gail. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Approval of sale of property. Motion by Dan. Second by Steve. That was those computers, yep. Motion and a second for approval of sale of property. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Personnel. Superintendent summative evaluation timeline. It's informational. It's in the drive. Take a look at that and make sure everything is complete by those deadlines. Otherwise, you'll hear from Amy. And thank you for your diligence in getting that done. B, approval of board's determination of appropriate negotiating unit for administrators. Is there a motion? Motion by Diane, second by Gail. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of board's determination of appropriate negotiating unit for administrators. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval of board's determination of appropriate negotiating unit for teachers. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve, second by Gail. We have a motion and a second for approval of board's determination of appropriate negotiating for unit for teachers. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. 6, policy and procedures. A, approval of the second reading of the GAAE critical race theory policy. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Second by Dan? Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for, oh, sorry, Melissa. Didn't see you waving.
I just wanted to clarify that this is just a policy that is required by the school board legal team. It is not necessarily saying that we are approving teaching critical race in our classrooms.
So the policy relates to, it is a required policy. It relates to administrative rules that were created based on North Dakota Century Code from the special session. So law was passed related to critical race theory. We are required by law and administrative regulations to pass a policy. And this is the policy that was developed by the North Dakota School Boards Association.
In relation to the law.
Yeah, it's a legal requirement.
Good question, Melissa, though. So we have a motion and a second for approval of the second reading of the GAAE critical race theory policy. Any other discussion from the board? Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of the amended FDH Students in Foster Care Policy and subsequent review of FDH-E2 Foster Care Student Transportation Plan. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Second? Second by Steve? We have a motion and a second for approval of the amended FDH Students in Foster Care Policy and subsequent review of FDH-E2 Foster Care Student Transportation Plan. Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. C, approval of amended FDB Education of the Homeless Student Policy and subsequent approval of FDB-BR Education of the Homeless Dispute Resolution Procedure and attached review of FDB-E2 District Level Dispute Resolution Form. Is there a motion for C1 and A? Motion by Aaron. Is there a second? Second by Jason. So we have a motion and a second for approval amended FDB Education of the Homeless Student Policy and subsequent approval of FDB-BR Education of the Homeless Dispute Resolution Procedure and attached review of FDB-E2 District Level Dispute Resolution Form. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under tuition, nothing under other. Items for future agenda. Aaron. Oh, sorry, I missed someone over here. I saw a hand. Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
Just in regards to the budgeting for next annual, do we have a schedule of when we want to have that together? And will we be pulling the finance committee in that as a to help with the, prepare the recommendation for the board?
Yeah, the preliminary agenda, or the preliminary budget's approved in July, but we'll work on a timeline. And yes, we will need to bring a finance committee meeting together, a handful of things that you need to talk about in particular, support staff in that arena. So that would probably be in March, April.
Probably April, yeah. Okay. Dan.
Pursuant to the initial comment from the superintendent's report, can we add in an agenda item for a couple months from now, informational, to have a discussion regarding the further impacts of the investigations?
Yeah. And I'd like to probably talk with you about maybe a little more detail on what you'd be looking for, and that would help me understand too.
And maybe we can even do board education or something with it too. So we can, you guys can make sure you're, what you want is covered, so. Any other items for future agenda? If there's other items that you think of, outside of this board meeting, just let myself or Dr. Leck know so we can get them on the agenda. Meetings to be scheduled. There's a Health Insurance Committee meeting Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 3:45 p.m. in the District Office Conference Room. Our next school board meeting is Monday, February 20th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. Possible executive session to discuss negotiation strategies. Is there a motion for that? Motion? I don't know that we need that, but I want to leave it open for a motion, okay? Moving on, the monthly superintendent evaluation, Section 1, goal and vision setting, and Section 5, operations and resource management. Reminder that there is the evaluation timeline to complete, so we can be ready for that at our March 6th meeting. There being no further business before the board, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.